can remember. Just really wanted to give back to my community. I also work for the state, so it was an easy transition to go from state work to local work, which is great. And yeah, I love Gorham. I love the memories that I was able to make there growing up, and wanted to be able to help people continue on with that.
And now, in terms of, I think where we stand now, most recently you passed the budget. Talk to us about how some of these recent meetings have gone, among the board members and members of the public, because there was just a resounding idea of, we're finding this very, very hard to understand. We don't get this line item. We don't know what that means. How were you able to first of all, what was the issue? And then how were you able to come to a conclusion and then successfully pass the budget?
Yep. So a few years ago, we switched to a bookkeeping company instead of doing it in-house, and they have their formatting that they prefer. And it was definitely took a little transitionary period for people to understand, what each line item means. When you look at the budget, there's abbreviations and codes for account numbers that the more interaction you have with it, the more questions you ask, you can figure out what they are. But if you just look at it, it looks like random numbers and letters and words. So the last few meetings have been productive, I would say. We've definitely fielded a lot of questions. We've been able to ask a lot of our own questions. The company has been very responsive to any questions that we've been able to ask, which is always very helpful when we're the ones up there getting grilled, and we're able to actually answer some questions. It's always very nice. But yeah, I'd say overall it was a abbreviated process, but we were able to pass it in time. Budgets are due by the 20th, I believe, of November, so we were able to get it done in time. We had a few days to spare in case something else came up, and
I'm curious, does this situation that the town board has found itself in over the last, say, 3-ish months, does it say that maybe the process should look a little different moving forward? Maybe you guys approach it a little differently next year, next go-around?
Yeah, I think every year with every process, there's an opportunity to learn. In years past, there may have been different forms of communication, especially when we had someone in-house. You can walk down the hallway and go ask, hey, what does this one mean again? Versus talking with a representative from a company that might also be working with 6 or 7 different towns. So that's one of the things that we're looking at moving forward with next year, whether or not we want to stay with a company or go back to in-house. But we're definitely learning, and it's always a learning process.
And in terms of where things stand with the relationship among I just talked about for the board members and the public, things were bad. Do you think that things are getting better? Are you, from where you're sitting, do you feel like people are coming down, are starting to understand more, or are things still really pretty tense?
Well, I'd say things get tense. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're bad. And I say that because people feel that they are able to come to our meetings and express their opinions. And a lot of the times those conversations, because we are talking about the dollars and cents of everyday life, people can get very passionate about them. And but that hasn't stopped anyone from coming in. So I think our relationship with the public is good. Definitely that meeting that you came in first was probably the most passionate meeting we've had in regards to short-term rental law. But again, that's where we're talking about people's, in some cases, a decent portion of people's income when inflation's very high.
But that's a perfectly transitioning to my next question. I was going to ask about short-term rental law. That really was a contentious point at that meeting. And don't we have another meeting, or is another hearing coming up? Like, what's the next step when it comes to that short-term rental law?
Yeah, so that was the October meeting. We held a public hearing for it. I believe we adjourned or closed it for the time being, and then we reopened it and then closed it in the beginning of November at our next monthly meeting. There were still a few questions that unfortunately hadn't been answered yet from the public and from members of the board. So we've been able to work with our code enforcement officer as well as our town attorney on them to hopefully get them answered. And the next step will be putting it up for a vote and hopefully getting it passed at our next meeting in December.
And I'm always curious, as a philosophy, how does the board sort of approach the growth versus maintaining place and maintaining what residents have historically seen in Gorham? How do you walk that line? Obviously, it's tough when you have folks, especially coming in, developers coming in saying, "Hey, we want to be in Gorham." So how do you walk that line, or what are some of the things that you guys think about when you're weighing those things?
That's a great question. So historically, we're a very rural town, very agricultural town. Lots of farmland, which is one of the reasons our taxes have been so cheap. We don't need the services for as much farmland, which is great. But one of the things that we definitely always look back to, and we just updated or in the process of updating, is our comprehensive plan. We're in the process of that now, and I know they're nearing the end or have concluded it, which is a statement by the people as to what they want in the town. So as we move forward and developers come in, we have had a few, no doubt about it. We have access to the lake, which people always want. So as we move forward with proposals, we look back to what the people want, whether or not it'll impact the culture of the town, the agriculturalness of it, and ultimately what's best from the people's perspective and from the town's future perspective.
And one of the stories that I worked on through our series on the town of Gorham had to do with safety on County Road 18, and obviously we haven't heard from the Sheriff's Office about what is or isn't being done in terms of enforcement, patrolling, et cetera. But from the town's perspective, what is the logical next step when it comes to County Road 18 and some of the safety concerns that residents along there or even just frequent travelers have?
So, well, the first one would be with the snow. Snow coming in and snow coming up, obviously making sure our roadways are clear, safe for passage. But more importantly, to that point, obviously we have CMAC and a new wedding venue going up on County Road 18. Unfortunately, it is a county road, so we as a town have very little say in what can happen with it. It comes down to the county, but definitely trying to keep an open mind with residents when issues do occur that we can relay to the county and the county administrator, just to see what ways we can always make our town safer. I mean, if you guys are familiar, it's going up a big windy hill, and people like to rev their engines going up it, unfortunately, but it is an ongoing issue that we have to address, especially with farmland and all that.
And it tends to be the case when we talk to folks in elected office in rural communities. There tends to be a feeling of there are things that are out of our control, whether it be because it's a county level issue or a regional issue or perhaps even a state issue. When it comes to what the town of Gorham is looking at now, moving forward, where does the highway building and the concerns that residents had about that fit into the bigger picture when you're looking forward to 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, so obviously we experienced quite the speed bump with the recent vote to overturn the board's decision to move forward with the bond resolution for the highway department. So it's in essence, it's back to the drawing board. It's whether or not we want to keep pushing forward with this plan and finding a way to fund it, or do we kind of change course and go with something else? The next step is definitely, the next immediate step is making sure that the building is up to code and is going to work for the near future, and then what plans we might have moving forward with that.
Very cool. Is there any, when you look at the end of this year, and probably for most of the town board, you guys want to just get through the rest of the year so you can move on to 2023. Top priority. What do you think the thing is going to be, the big thing come January, that the town begins to look at?
My guess would be, looking at the landscape of it, probably going back to our big capital projects. One of them being the potential for, or the new highway barn or projects at the highway barn. And then also looking at our water and wastewater plants. There's upgrades that are needed because of new regulations with Department of Health, but also with the influx and increase of blue-green algae and various things in Canandaigua Lake.
Infrastructure is a top priority for you guys right now?
Oh, absolutely. Whether it's the capital projects, roads, or capital projects on roads.
Right. All right, Jake, appreciate the time. Thanks so much for taking it today.
Thank you, guys.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Finger Lakes Today. Thanks for watching. Jim Sinacropi and Sydney Radka will be at the desk tomorrow morning, live at 9 a.m. Have a great day, guys.